Okay, we just have to talk about Senna. This champion is absolutely broken in the current meta, and high elo Senna players are simply crushing it, getting amazing results. Teemo on Duty 69% win rate, Fantix 70% win rate, Forever Salty 73% win rate, just to give you some high elo profiles for reference in case you want to do some research yourself. But as you already know, this is not Senna's support. Yes, she is intended to be played as a support champion, but these crazy numbers are actually the result of Senna AD carry. Also, it is not just high elo Senna mains who are dominating with this champion. Sure, the most skilled Senna players can take advantage of Senna AD carry the best, but even if you factor in all the beginners who just picked up the champion, Senna is still the most powerful ADC in the game. Senna ADC in fact has a 54% win rate overall, making her one of the most powerful picks in solo queue period. So in this video, we will go over Senna ADC in great detail, shedding light on why she is so strong right now and how you can take advantage of this yourself. Even if you are not yet a Senna expert, you can still expect strong results playing this champion, but if that's not enough for you, if you don't just want strong results but the best results, you can combine this powerful pick with the most OP climbing tool there is, one-on-one coaching from a challenger coach. And this is where my sponsors from Solo Queue Solution come into play. In my opinion, their coaching service is the best on the market, which is why I chose them for my partners. They have challenger coaches for all 5 roles, by the way, so even if you are, let's say, a jungle main and watch this video because you want to learn how to counter Senna, the coaching service from Solo Queue Solution is still the perfect tool for you if you want to finally climb to high elo. And let's face it, League of Legends is a very difficult game, and it is easy to fall into the trap of feeling powerless and to start blaming losses on random teammates. But with a challenger coach telling you exactly what you need to do to improve, you will start to see the game from an entirely different perspective. You'll realize that, at the end of the day, League of Legends is just a game of knowledge combined with motor skills, and all of this can be learned and taught. The coaches from Solo Queue Solution have already helped countless players to climb to Diamond, even if they've been hard stuck Silver for years. But before you get too excited, please keep in mind that coaching is not for everyone. I always like to compare it to taking piano lessons from a professional pianist. Sure, the pianist can teach you all the best practices, but even the best piano teacher in the world won't be able to help you if you don't also practice playing at home by yourself. The same is true for League of Legends. The coaching is not a magic pill. It won't transform you overnight. However, if you play at least 15 hours per week in addition to attending your coaching sessions, which means you will have more than enough time to actually implement what you learn, the coaching program will lead to rapid improvements for you. So if you are one of those highly competitive players whose main hobby is League of Legends, you can book your first session right away following the link in the video description. Anyway, let's now talk about Senna's optimal runes and items, before then diving into the analysis so we can see exactly why she is so strong. The best rune page for Senna AD carry is Fleet Footwork, Presence of Mind, Legend Alacrity and Cutdown, with Biscuit Delivery and Approach Velocity secondary. Senna is all about kiting and getting to trigger her passive in fights, which means landing an auto attack and a Q or vice versa, and Fleet Footwork is the keystone that complements that playstyle the most. Not only does this keystone boost your early game, which is the phase of the game where you are most vulnerable, but it also gives you more movement speed, and movement speed is simply OP on this champion, as I will explain later. Anyway, for the most part you use this for kiting, so you want to walk up, trigger this rune, follow up with another attack. The enemy can't run away if you are sped up, so you can get the second attack in for free, or you can use it to escape, to kite away, to play with your max range so you don't get caught. Now, being on the precision path, the next choice of Presence of Mind is also very natural, because Senna relies on her spells. Yes, your auto attacks do a lot of work, but your Q spell is just as important, and Q costs a lot of mana. But Senna also wants to fight for long periods of time. You want to get multiple Qs off, Ws and Es of course as well, and your ultimate, and during long fights you could run without this rune, so Presence of Mind will keep you topped off in terms of mana. Now, Legend Alacrity might seem odd to some people because Senna doesn't really scale too well with attack speed. Keep in mind, she has inherent attack speed nerfs in her kit, so she doesn't get as much wind-up cooldown reduction, because attack speed is essentially that. Cooldown reduction for your auto attack wind-up. But yeah, she has this nerf in her kit, but still, this is the best rune on this slot. Senna is very punishable while she is in her auto attack animation, and Legend Alacrity kicks into gear right from the start of the game. You start with 3% extra attack speed, which is noticeable in lane. It will keep you safer while you go for your Q auto trades. And also, if you want to evaluate a rune in any given slot, you have to keep an eye on the alternatives, which in this case would be Legend Tenacity and Legend Bloodline, both of which are inferior to Legend Alacrity. Tenacity only really helps in situations in which you don't want to be in the first place. It will give you a little bit of more leeway when you get caught by crowd control, but if you play Senna well, you should stay at max range at all times and also never be the target of an engage, so in an ideal world, when you play the champion as it's supposed to be played, you do not even make use of Legend Tenacity. Now Legend Bloodline on the other hand might be a little bit more intuitive for AD carries that don't auto-attack as much, that are more spell-based, and Senna is certainly spell-based to some degree, but you also have to keep in mind that it's pretty much only there to enable your build diversity, so you can build damage only without needing to spend money on lifesteal, and Senna doesn't need that either. Senna gets self-healing from free footwork and her Q. Keep in mind, Q scales with lethality and with damage, so her heals will be massive, and also her passive, once you overstack on crit, you will transform that into lifesteal as well, so in the late game lifesteal is also taken care of. So yeah, especially with this comparison, Legend Alacrity is the rune that makes the most sense, and I hope I could convince all of the doubters out there. Now the final rune on the precision path is Cut Down, which is a very interesting choice for most AD carries. You pretty much only take this in tank matchups where you need to cut down the front line, hence the name, but Senna actually wants this rune every single time, because Senna's only weakness is her HP. Senna's defensive base stat profile is extremely low, which means once you get caught, so once the enemy breaks through your range, you will just die. However, with Cut Down you weaponize this low HP, which means you get a massive damage increase not just during the late game against tanks, but during all stages of the game. Definitely the best rune in that slot, way better than Coup de Grace. Now as I've already said, Presence of Mind takes care of your mana during teamfights and in the late game, and Biscuit Delivery does the exact same thing but during the early game. It is crucial that you're always able to trade with Q and auto attack in lane, and Biscuit Delivery with the instant mana regeneration when you press it will allow you to do this. Trading often is important, as you're about to see, because it's the only way to really ensure you get passive stacks. So yeah, Q auto, bread and butter combo, you have to be able to access this combo at all times. Now Senna's Q also slows, and her W is also a form of crowd control, which makes approach velocity quite interesting. Definitely the best rune to take in combination with Biscuit Delivery, because Senna is all about her 2-hit combo. You want to Q and then auto, ideally, because Q slows them, which means you can easily apply your auto attack, and with all the movement speed from footwork and approach velocity, the enemy won't have time to run away during your animations. Kiting at max range is the name of the game for this champion, and approach velocity, while not as strong as on Ashe, definitely, it's still the perfect rune for Senna in this slot. Now some people fall into the trap of not taking approach velocity and instead taking the magical footwear rune, but this is a mistake on Senna because, as I've said, she's all about kiting, so you want to buy boots early. Approach velocity does mean you don't save the gold from getting the boots for free, which would also be nice, but you can only get the boots when the rune triggers at 12 minutes. You want to buy boots early, however, so you can kite as fast as possible, as early as possible. Always go for this exact rune page. Okay, now for the item build. This is where it gets spicy. Senna is a late game hypercarry, but she still takes advantage of lethality, which is an extremely strong stat in the current game right now. A, let's say, cookie cutter build, which you can go for every single game, would be Boots of Swiftness first, then Yomu's Ghostblade and Opportunity, with your late game options being Rapid Fire Cannon, Lord Dominic's Regards, and Infinity Edge, in this order most of the time. Keep in mind that while you finish Boots of Swiftness before you finish Yomu's Ghostblade, you still want to get a Serrated Dirk as fast as possible to take advantage of lethality as fast as you can. Just with a Serrated Dirk, Senna will out-trade pretty much anyone, and being able to consistently trade against the enemy is super important for your soul stacks. But yeah, early Boots of Swiftness will add a lot of safety to your lane phase and enable you to go for your game plan, kiting, running in and out of range, and taking the enemy down with your pressure. The first full item of Yomu's Ghostblade also helps with that, because it gives you more movement speed when you press the active, which makes kiting all that much easier. In addition to that, the passive, which gives you movement speed when you're out of combat, allows you to join fights quickly wherever they are on the map. As you will see during the analysis, it's super important to be able to roam, and you want to be in as many fights as possible so you can keep scaling with those stacks. As you know, AD carries need farm, so you will farm a lot of minions, which means your passive will trigger less often on minions, since the soul drop rate is higher for when you don't last hit them, so being in fights is your main source of income, so to speak, when it comes to souls. Now the next item, Opportunity, is also following the same idea. It also gives you more movement speed and more lethality, boosting your early game as much as possible, but there is an alternative to this one. I actually like to go for, and many high elo players do the same, go for Edge of Night instead of Opportunity. Yes, you will have less movement speed and also a little bit of an anti-combo with Cut Down, but Cut Down is still plenty strong on Senna because she is so squishy, and Edge of Night gives you more leeway for errors. In fact, if you kite at max range while still having the spell shield, the enemy would need to overcommit to get to you anyway, and with Edge of Night they only get your spell shield and maybe a little bit of health, and it's very unlikely they actually kill you if you're a little bit out of position. So Edge of Night, while making it a little bit harder to position because less movement speed, will help you in case you mess up. But I mean, it's personal preference. Opportunity or Edge of Night both are viable after Ghostblade. Now, Rapid Fire Cannon takes your range, your kiting, and everything to the absolute extreme. By the way, in case you wonder why Senna is so much about movement speed, this is actually a universal truth in pretty much any video game. And sorry for the nerdy comparison here, I'm not even sure if everyone will get this, but this is also the reason why the characters Sonic the Hedgehog and Captain Falcon in the Super Smash Bros. Games do not have projectiles. It's because movement speed and range scale every time with each other. No matter which game, no matter which context, having range and movement speed will make for an OP combo in any case. Think of it that way. If you have, to stay in the context of League of Legends, if you have a champion that is a melee champion, so close attack range, but it has so much movement speed and attack speed that you can run up at 600 range, auto-attack, and run out of range again before the enemy gets to even complete their auto-attack animation. I know it's an extreme example, but it gets across the point. You effectively still outrange them due to movement speed alone. And yeah, Senna will take advantage of this very well, because her range is growing and growing throughout the game, and with even more movement speed, your effective range grows even more. In any case, with Rapid Fire Cannon, also your literal attack range grows, which makes Senna even more oppressive. So easy combo, easy inclusion, also increases your crit chance, which means you get your lifesteal conversion a little bit faster. It just makes for great late game scaling. And in the late game, lethality is not worth as much anymore because armor grows with level quite significantly. Now your next item Lord Dominik's Regards is also very synergistic. Same idea as Cut Down, the Giant Slayer passive on Senna is just so strong due to her low HP. And in the late game, you always want an armor penetration, a % armor penetration item, because as I've said, armor scales with levels quite significantly, so even non-tanks will take a lot of damage from the Last Whisper passive. Now the final item, Infinity Edge, is a very common choice, but to be fair, it might be overkill in terms of damage. If you are a little bit concerned that the enemy can zone break, for example, a Rengar with his ultimate can just walk up and jump on top of you, and if the enemy gets to do this while your team is not close enough to peel, this would be bad news, so you can go for Guardian Angel instead of Infinity Edge. Sure, Guardian Angel is less power than Infinity Edge, but if you have infinite scaling, do you really need that much damage? I personally like Guardian Angel here better, but I mean, if you want to go full ham, Infinity Edge is also fine. Okay, now that you know the theory of her runes and items, let's go in-game to see Senna's game plan. Senna as an AD carry is not merely capable of fighting during the early lane phase, but actually gets rewarded for it. She already has above average range right from the start, and her Q is an excellent trading tool. Also, you won't get as many passive stacks from minions when you are farming them, so trading often can make up for this, as you are now getting soul stacks from hitting enemy champions instead. In fact, you should be looking for small quick trades with auto and Q as much as possible, so you can keep your soul count high. There is no reason to be afraid here, as the self-heal on your Q will take care of any damage you might be taking in return. Especially once you have your first serrated Dirk, you can trade extra aggressively, as the Q healing scales greatly with lethality. However, you must of course always ensure that you don't find yourself in a situation where you can get trapped by crowd control, which definitely can happen if you are aggressive all the time. You definitely don't want to get collapsed on without an escape plan, because else the enemy can easily take advantage of your low HP and lack of mobility, so always have a backup plan ready. As long as you follow these ideas, however, you should have a very strong lane phase that perfectly sets you up for your late game scaling, both in terms of items and soul stacks. And this would be the worst case, mind you. I mean, that no one is playing around bot lane and you're all by yourself. You would scale even harder when there are lots of fights nearby, where you can abuse the early power of lethality, as well as getting even more passive stacks on top. Senna loves chaotic lanes, but unlike a Draven for instance, she doesn't rely on them, as she has a powerful late game as well. However, once the lane phase ends, this is where the fun really starts. You want to position close to your teammates, ideally near the center of the map, so you can quickly join skirmishes no matter where they happen. In the meantime, you just farm as much as you can, but even if your teammates choose to steal your CS, something that troubles many ADC mains at this stage, Senna still gets to scale with increased soul drops. Anyway, it will only be a matter of time until someone starts a fight, and you simply follow at max range. This is just so free. The combination of move speed and range makes it super easy for you to have impact here. Add to that the self-peel from your E-spell, and the enemy will be out of options real quick. And with this bread and butter mid-game macro, it is just so easy. You collect the minions as they approach, keeping your tower safe in the process. But as soon as something happens on the map, you'd stop farming immediately and go there with your massive movement speed from items, and once you are there, the fight almost plays itself. You're always joining the fight slightly late this way, which means it will never be you who gets targeted by the enemy engage. The rest is literally just kiting at max range, as you can see, dealing massive damage with lethality items while staying safely protected between your teammates. Just look how the combination of your range and the utility from your items allows you to even pressure enemy assassins who normally hard counter squishy marksman champions. The key here is, of course, playing around vision. If you face check a Qiyana in Fog of War, your range would be of no use. But as long as you play around areas in which you have control, there's literally nothing the enemy can do. And as you know, Senna's range keeps growing as the game progresses, and the nature of her kit means it is not even important whom you attack. You will cut down frontline champions just as efficiently as squishies thanks to your passive, while naturally generating even more stacks. All of this gets enabled when you can avoid being the target of an engage, which is, again, super easy thanks to your range and move speed. A positive feedback loop, so to speak. You'd have to actively mess up in order to give the enemy an opening, actually. And do we even have to talk about Senna's late game? Your game plan stays the same, but it gets easier and easier to execute due to your ever-growing range and damage. This is where the champion really gets most ridiculous, and if you just stubbornly keep following the game plan, you will solo carry most of your games at this point latest. But unlike with most late-game hypercarries, the point at which Senna becomes outright oppressive to play against will be reached much earlier and more consistently than for other champions. And consistency is key for solo queue, as you probably know. Ease of execution is what makes this pick OP, not just in high elo but also for low elo players. Once you've internalized the game plan, it is so hard to mess up, honestly. I mean, just look at this. While other ADCs have to take risks to deal damage, Senna does it from a screen away. The only stage of the game where you can realistically mess up with this champion would be the early game, and even there you have the power of lethality items. But if you want to make sure you know all about the best laning strategies for AD carries, you can also check out my AD carry lane phase guide by clicking the link on your screen.